I welcome all of you to our panel on tips for young academics. I'm very happy that we have so many people attending, which probably means that we all feel very young or are, which is a good achievement for Escola as well, if we have so many young people around. We thought last year that it would probably be a good, I mean, Escola, as you know, is a bit like family, or this is how we try to think about it. And in families, you have people giving you advice and helping you out and etc. And we thought we should do that in Escola. If people, and particularly young people, come to Escola and meet all these how could I put it, all these very honorable and distinguished, excellent professors from all over the world, why not sort of connect them? So if we had been in Porto, we would probably have sweated even more than now, and B, we would have set up like little tables and groups, and at one table you find Giorgio Monti, and at the other table you find Arias Raki, and you find Danny Sokol, and you find Michel Gall, and you find Bill Kovacic, and so people could assemble with them and find people giving them advice, whatever. Now we do it in a digital form, and I'm very, very happy that 3 of these distinguished, outstanding professors who made it already, even though they look so incredibly young, are with us today to give us some advice. And these 3 people are Giorgio Monti, Danny Sokol, and Michel Gall. Michel, I named you last because you're the president of Escola, and so the president obviously is sort of, I'm climbing up the ladder. This morning it was only the vice president of the commission. Now it's even the president of Escola that I have to interview. Okay, so I'm very happy that the 3 of you joined us, and without hesitation. And the main aim of this panel is to give the floor to the younger people to ask questions that trouble them, that are on their minds, and to see what the 3 of you can contribute on that. And I probably should also give one warning in the beginning, which I find important, and that is that whatever these 3 people will tell you, it may not be the right advice for you. So we don't take any responsibility for your future career. Escola is not liable for if it works or not. If it works, Escola is it. If not, probably not. So this just serves as an impulse or inspiration. And Giorgio, maybe I start with you. You have an incredible sort of path behind you. You are an Italian national, you were trained in the United Kingdom, you were at the University of Leicester, then you moved to LSE, then to the European University Institute in Florence. And now you're back you are at Tilburg University, so you've seen quite a couple of different universities, and you have also supervised many doctoral candidates and have seen many people going their way into academia or trying to write something of impact. What would you see as important for these people? I would give you as a first question, I mean, probably we all agree it's important to write something that is excellent, right? This is what we strive for. And in the end, we put something down on paper and try to publish excellent stuff. What, in your view, makes an excellent paper or an excellent PhD thesis? What would you say?
Giorgio, you need to unmute.
Yeah, I just have. Sorry, my mouse was slower than I thought. I have 3 suggestions, and maybe these set the bar rather low, but this comes from experience of a lot of things that don't even reach this bar. I think the first is clarity. Let's understand what you're saying. I want to read the first page and understand what the paper is about. And a lot of things I referee, you need to start getting into the reader's mind. And what I find is that sometimes when people speak to their paper, they actually express themselves much better. So maybe people should record themselves when they speak to their paper and then write what they've spoken rather than what they've written. The second thing is you want to read the paper. And this is in part about style. You've got to invite the reader in, so lure them in. If this is the 15th paper you're reading on collective dominance, you've got to give a hook that there's something that the reader is going to discover by reading your paper that they're not going to discover anywhere else. And this is particularly important if you're young, because if you're an established academic, you know, if I discover a new paper by Eleanor Fox, I'll read it because it's written by Eleanor Fox. I don't really care about the topic. But if I don't know the person, I want to be lured in a little bit more. And the third thing is not to be too original. to try to be, yes, say something new, develop a new methodology, but it's not as if you have to rethink this discipline in your first paper. A conventional paper which makes a clear, clever message that has not been out there before is just as satisfying to read, and you want to learn more about the person. It's sometimes some PhDs I've been reading at the moment, they try to say everything about antitrust in their thesis, and you're too young for that. You have to wait until you're 70 years old to write everything about antitrust in a very casual way. At the moment, pick a narrow topic and develop it nicely.
You've done that in your book, though, haven't you?
Did I? Well, that's my failure.
Thank you, Giorgio, for that start. I pass on the torch to Danny Sokol. Danny, you're in the United States, and that is probably also sort of a bit different environment. Just to mention it correctly, you're a professor at the University of Florida, and you are, if I've read that correctly, I didn't know that before. Actually, you have Panama citizenship, and you have some involvement with Latin America as well. I wasn't aware of that before, so maybe that also opens a window to that direction. And you've taught at diverse places all over the world, in Tokyo, in Melbourne, in Haifa, and at colleges in the United States, and have been trained in Oxford and also in US places. What would you say? What makes an excellent paper?
Let me just add something else. I've actually visited to other departments as well. So I also teach in our College of Health and Human Performance, and I spent this past semester in our College of Engineering. So I think that matters, because what you're really asking us is, how do you engineer a career? And there are a series of decisions that you make around the world. So, and I think that Michal and Giorgio will agree with this. There's what you think you want to do now, and then the way that your career develops is not at all how you've planned it. So I'd say think big, but also think small. So in many ways, it echoes Giorgio's points. Take on something manageable, but also if you are, so I want to reframe, I think, Giorgio's comments. I think we'll probably all agree, but we'll take a little bit of a different spin. So here's what I would say. If you're in a crowded field, make very clear what your unique contribution is. And there really should be something unique. And if there isn't, don't bother. It's already crowded. Find something where you will be known. So I'll give you an example of someone who, who actually went to a field that at the time was not crowded. She was the only one in the field. There's someone who's going to be speaking right after me who wrote on competition law in small economies. Wonderful book, really opened the field where there was no field before. So sometimes, Giorgio, it is worth taking a risk. And I think, but you actually have to say something new in a new field. And I think Michal did that exceptionally well. So it's worth taking a risk if there's really something new. The problem is that it's much like going to a restaurant in the United States. Your eyes are bigger than your stomach. And that's, I think, the tragic flaw of many PhD students. They want to take on everything and completely revolutionize the field. And most papers are not going to do that, whether you're 17 or 70. So it's take on something manageable, but I'd say, and who am I to talk about passion when we have an Italian? But nevertheless, I say, whatever your topic is, be passionate about it. Because if you are not excited about your topic, you're not going to write well. And then finally, what matters and why to talk about the other fields. A lot of what we do, in many ways, though it may be unique to competition law, other people have thought about these issues before with existing frameworks in other fields. And in many of the best papers in competition law essentially are, to take Michal's work in a slightly different way, they're really about a different kind of legal transplant. We are basically transplanting ideas from, let's say, administrative law or procedural law or international trade, or from different fields like economics or finance into competition. And I think that really is important to do a good job in translation.
Thank you so much. Michelle, I want to pass that question to you as well. What makes an excellent paper? And Danny was so kind to introduce your seminal paper, or rather book, that you wrote some time ago. I don't know how, when that was the case. Before you trained at Tel Aviv and Toronto, you are now a professor at Haifa University and a scholar president, but you've also been around and as a visiting professor and in very many places: NYU, Columbia, Georgetown, Melbourne, Sciences Po, Lisbon. I guess I forgot something. What's your impression from looking at all these different universe that you see?
Well, with regard to the papers, first of all, I'm going to echo some of the things that my two wonderful colleagues before that have said. So, you know, to put this in a few bullet points. First of all, choose your topic wisely. And what do I mean by wisely? I first of all echo Danny's excellent comment that you need to be enthusiastic. Time is such a rare resource. Do something that really interests you. If it interests you, it makes it easier to interest others. Okay, so this is one part about wisely. The other one is to ask yourself, what is your comparative advantage? So some of you might have training in another field, you know, in economics or psychology or something else, or you might be interested in something else, or you might have a family member that, or somebody closer, a close friend who does something else. For example, my husband as a professor of computer science and of data science, I actually take advantage of that. You know, when we go on family meetings and we drive for 2 hours, I use that. And I actually listen to what he says. So this is part of it. So you have to ask yourself, what is your comparative advantage there? So to make a good paper. And the third part about, and another comment here is, I think you don't need to be afraid. Don't be afraid to venture a bit beyond your, you know, what you've done before. And I actually think that with regard to choosing your topics for paper, I think it's good and wise to have at least one paper a year, one project a year, which is innovative, okay? Because sometimes I see, you know, CVs of young academics, and they're afraid. You know, what they do is they have one small paper and another and another, and they are carried out to these small projects, which are really neat and they're nice and they add. But I say to my students, there's a very big difference between putting a brick on a wall and breaking a wall or building a new one, okay? So I'm not saying all your papers should be new walls, but what I'm saying is that if you really want other people to, you know, single you out for your work, choose one a year that you're making an important contribution. Okay, all the others can be, you know, small bites, but choose one that will be such a topic.
Simon, you have asked a question that Jojo has already partly answered in the chat on publication strategy, but maybe I give you the floor nonetheless. We need an icebreaker. Come on, so safe.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was wondering because like this world is quite new for me, and I always wonder, like, do you just send your papers everywhere? But like my name is not known, so I can imagine that it's easier to have someone more senior, as Georgia said, that can help you with that. But that, of course, is also something that you have to come by, someone in the academic world. So I was wondering if you just give some tips and tricks on that.
Yeah, if I may, I mean, Jojo, you've said something on that already. Maybe if we take that into a larger context, what's sort of the right publication strategy? Do you go for the top journals right at the beginning, and then you go down, or I mean, probably we've all been at that point where we didn't know where to send something to or know how to finish the paper up. Danny, do you have any suggestions on that?
So it works different everywhere else in the world than the United States. So maybe I should just begin with this. In the United States, it's a simultaneous ascending auction where you send out to everybody and you keep working your way up. but it's not based on real quality. It's based on perceived quality by 24-year-olds who don't know what real quality is. And so there are a number of factors that they look at. They look at the institution you're at. So if they've never, it doesn't matter, for example, however prestigious, your chair is, say in Germany, if it's somebody, at Northwestern University who's never been outside the Midwest of the United States, it's irrelevant. You're no different to them than the person that sweeps the streets. And so your stuff typically will not place well, no matter how truly brilliant it is. This is the shortcoming of the US system. But to the European and frankly rest of the world model of true peer review, I'd actually say before you send it out, workshop the paper, because if you don't workshop it, you've wasted the editor's time and your own. Because what you think is a brilliant idea, in fact, may need to be reframed or reconceptualized. So I'd say you'll have a sense based on the kind of feedback you get, where you should submit, and oftentimes editors will be in the audience and might signal to you informally, you should submit.
Yeah, great. I think Escola is a forum for that as well, to workshop your paper, as you put it. Ali, I would love to take your question.
Yes, thank you for this opportunity, and it's a great pleasure for me to join Escola conference for the first time, and I'm calling from Nigeria. My question is, young adults who will publish in big-time journals on the subject matter, competition law, and the rest, we don't have the capacity of reaching out to those publications. They may not take a papers coming from young academics, and especially coming from Africa. And I don't know, maybe if Escola has a provision for
I guess we don't hear you very
mentoring. If you have someone more senior to place it, then you co-author it as. Hello, sir. Sir, can you hear me, sir?
I think I've understood the gist of your question, but we're hearing you and not so well. I think what the question you have is people from developing countries. How do they sort of, or who are not sort of in this European US bubble?
Yes, how do they
publish? Is that the question? Michal, maybe you can.
Yes, although the.
Unfortunately, the connection is really disrupted, or at least for me, I guess.
Yes, but you almost get what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, how do we co-author papers with highly experienced and professionals on competition law? How do you co-author papers with them in big-time journals? How do you get mentored by them? That's question number one. If you hear me very well, you hear that one very well, sir.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Michal. Maybe you can say a word on perspectives.
Yeah, I would like to, a couple, several points. First is, I think that co-authoring with a senior co-author sometimes can be a good door to get, to good conferences, to good law reviews. However, it has a price, because if you do it too often, your file looks like you work with a senior person, and you don't necessarily, and then whoever looks at the file for your promotion might think that you do not necessarily know how to work on your own. So it always has to be a balance. So that's my first point. Second is that different jurisdictions have different kinds of signs of quality. So you actually have to ask yourself, what are the signs for quality of academic writing in your own jurisdiction? Okay, so for example, in my own jurisdiction, we have a very, very specific way in which all the journals in the world are coded, and like 5% are A+, and then you get 15 points per journal, and then 5% more are A and whatever, and half of the journals in the world you get nothing. Okay, So we have a very strict way of knowing how much each of our publication is worth, if you want. However, it's very different in the US and the EU, for example. So in the EU, ask yourself, what are the top journals? Is it the competition, sorry, is it the, are they the general journals like the Oxford Journal of Legal Studies or the Common Market Law Review or others? And which ones in competition law are the highest one? And then aim for them. That I would suggest. And another thing, and I think that's a partial answer to one of the questions that I saw, I think it's good to put your work as soon as you can out there through the digital media. Okay, today we can do it. We can do it through SSRN or academia.edu or whatever. And then it's yours. Even if it's published in a year and a half, you had it there. Okay, so I think this is something that, you know, even if you don't get it published soon or in a very good place, the idea is what counts, right? And if you have a good idea and it's out there on SSRN and people know about it, they will start using it.
Thank you, Michal. Let's take Theodosia's question. And while I take Theodosia's question, let's just co-read the chat because there's a lot going on already with some answers that are already provided there. Theodosia, you want to?
Yeah, Professor Gal just answered my question. My question was, I go to conferences and there is a discussion among young academics that they're a bit afraid of sharing their ideas in a public and big audience before their work is published. Because there is so much competition about who is going to publish first, the best idea. So there are a lot of incentives of imitating ideas. And I think for young academics, this is a risk because you have to share your ideas to improve them. But on the other hand, there is this risk that somebody else might imitate your idea. So my question was, is it a good idea to publish your paper on SSRN actually before it's published so that it's clear that it's your idea? Or by publishing the paper, you know, you disseminate your idea so somebody else might take it more quickly. That was my question. I think it's a dilemma. I don't know what is the right strategy in this. So that's why I would like to have advice on this. Thank you very much.
Danny, do you want to take that one?
So I think, so I understand the concern and very much appreciate it. So there's a general concern, and then actually this is not your concern. I know who your PhD advisor was, and he's spectacular. But there are some PhD advisors who actually are the ones that steal the ideas of the PhD students and don't credit them. And how do you find that out? I mean, it's very difficult when you're applying to PhD programs, but at a certain point, you begin to see certain patterns of behavior, not just for you, but for other people. So that's the most precarious of situations, when it's your own advisor who's doing that. But that does happen. So I don't always say trust but verify. On the broader question, I think Michal is right that you want to get your idea out. So there's sort of, when is it optimal to post on SSRN? You don't want a very dirty draft. You want something that is clear enough, but one where really it invites feedback from other people, because some people won't read past that first draft and will remember that first draft. So it has to be polished enough, although probably not in full form. The second thing is, even if you've done all of this, someone may quote unquote still take the idea and not credit you. And so part of this is your ability to market an idea. So there are certain people who are thought of as having originated an idea, where in fact, the idea had existed a few years before, but I'm not going to talk about contemporary ones because then I'd have to talk about people here. So I'm going to go in a very different direction. So if we think about one of the most important papers on predation, it was McGee's paper in the Journal of Law and Economics looking at Standard Oil. And it really shaped a generation of thinking about predation. Now, what's interesting is, in fact, McGee was not the first one to talk about that. It was actually Corwin Edwards, literally a decade before, on conglomerate business as a source of power and showing the limits of predatory pricing, including on Standard Oil. And it just goes to show you that it's not enough to have the idea, you have to market the idea, which means you have to go to enough conferences, but you also have to, as with any kind of store, if you have no marketing budget, you're not going to get sales, and you need attention.
Oh, we're back at attention markets. I've heard about that today. Great. Noga, you had I think you have very practical questions.
Hey, thank you. So I had two questions. The first is, how do I get started with writing? I mean, looking at the blank page of the Word or the PDF I opened, that's the most difficult part. And the second one is, do you have any tips for reading literature? Because I find myself reading back and forth stuff and keep reading it again, and I'm trying to summarize it or to put citations, and I still find myself going back and forth all the time.
Giorgio, is that something for you, maybe?
Yeah, I can try. Yeah, I can try. On the first one, I just write. Stream of consciousness, the first draft, I just write my conclusions. This paper will make the arguments and just start getting going. One thing, I know it's really painful because I can see it from the files I've accumulated from my doctoral students. At some point, you will write something that will be totally deleted. Okay, but that shouldn't put you off writing it in the first place because it's an exercise. It also gets you a bit into the mood. And the more you write, and then you will see where your problems are with the argument, if it doesn't flow or if it needs to be. So be prepared to start writing immediately. And maybe don't write from the beginning. Like a lot of PhD students, I tell them, look, don't start with chapter 1. Start with maybe in the middle of the thesis where you feel more comfortable. So if the topic is the law and economics of predatory pricing and you're stronger on the law, maybe write the bit on the law first and then go to the economics where you feel less comfortable and see how you can connect them. On reading, well, I think that's just a general problem that I also have, that, you want to read well. One thing I do is I try to ask myself, how can I summarize a paper in a sentence? So that then I remember this paper, that's what the paper says. So be able to get the gist of what the author says. The other thing is to try to put papers into families. So, if you're reading all the papers on predatory pricing, you say, well, these are the Chicagoans, for example, who are pro a very restrictive standard. These are the more progressive papers who are favoring a more relaxed standard, and try to categorize them like that. And then you'll feel, okay, I've read enough of the people who are making an argument this way, so I really can stop reading because, the next paper, the marginal utility would be much smaller.
Thank you. Very, very insightful.
Hey, can I just intervene to add something else? So I think, to echo what Georgia says, literally, just right is very important. And the biggest problem I think that young academics and PhD students have is what I call paralysis from analysis. They're just constantly reading and reading and reading and reading and reading and reading and reading. They're like, and then finally I'll write. Just write. So set yourself a goal. There are a certain number of words per day you're writing. Even if that's literally doing nothing other than adding footnotes, that counts. I want to see a word count every single day, because then your mind treats it routine, no different than exercise or anything else that you're doing. That's number one. Number two, again, to echo what Giorgio said, is like, how do you think about literature? Take a shortcut. There are plenty of handbooks that summarize the literature. Most of them do it relatively well. And that gives you a nice framing of overview to see not just that one work, but that work in a broader context. And that's a shortcut. And then you could delve into some of the seminal works or more contemporary works, but it gives you already an overview.
Very good points. Go to the intellectual gym. I take that from you, Danny. Train your muscles in the head every day. Vella, you had a question.
Yeah, I think Professor Gal answered it. All I wanted to know is, when you're doing a multidisciplinary research, for example, I'm doing a research that focuses on law, politics, and economics. So how do you decide the journal to really publish your work? Yeah.
Okay.
And also the methods, especially on the methods part of
Michelle, do you still want to add on that, or?
No, I actually have other points that I want to make, if that's okay.
Okay, go ahead, please go.
Okay, I think that especially if you're young, I mean, one of the things that I would look at is before you choose a journal, make sure that you are then allowed to publish, or that it's, you know, it's accessible. I can tell you from my own experience, I published in the CMLR, that was 15 years ago, and it wasn't on the American systems of LexisNexis. It wasn't on almost any system. I'm sure it is today, but our paper wasn't cited by anybody until we put it on SSRN 10 years afterwards. Okay, so make sure that the journal doesn't limit, you know, access of others to what you're doing, because you actually want people to know your work. And if I can make some small but important comments, learn to say no. Okay, I think that's actually important to any academic. Okay, because you get all kinds of invitations and all kinds of things. And you say this conference or this workshop or this small, you know, piece in this and here and whatever. So when you're, especially when you're a young academic, you have to be focused. Okay, you have to think about your tenure. Okay, so to get your tenure, you should not do all the small things that do not give you value. Even if you offend a friend, even if it's a really nice place to go to or whatever, okay? So you can do them at a later stage, not when you're a young academic.
Thank you. Arvin, you had a question as well.
Hi. So my question is a bit simple. Do you recommend to publish a part of your manuscript, PhD manuscript, before defending your thesis on a journal or even SSRM?
Jojo, I think that's for you.
I mean, with some tweaks, of course, like
yeah, sure. Well,
to
first
make
of all,
it as an article.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's a formal answer to this, which is you need to check the regulations of the institution you're registered in to see if this is actually allowed, because it might be that that's just forbidden. So you don't want to get into trouble. So one institution I worked with, this was absolutely fine, provided there was an acknowledgement in the PhD text that chapter 3 has already been published in a different version in Journal X. So first of all, institutionally. Secondly, I just had an editorial board meeting before this, and we turned down a paper because all that the author had done was take a bit of chapter 2, a bit of chapter 3, and compile them together. So you need to transform the chapter. A chapter flows nicely in a thesis, but as an article, as a standalone article, it's gonna have to look different. So there's actually quite a lot of work involved in transforming it. Of course, the core idea will be there, but you really need to work out hard how to make the introduction and the conclusion in particular allow the key idea in the paper to flow as a self-standing thing rather than as part of the bigger book, which maybe just to answer another question is the same thing when you transform the manuscript into a book. You've got to commit yourself to another year to transform the manuscript into something that reads more like a book for general audiences.
Thank you. I've skipped the question on economic literature. I know that this I think I have the feeling that this has been already very well answered in the chat. Nonetheless, Danny, if you want to make the point that economics is absolutely vital, I don't want to sort of restrict you in doing that or in pointing at that.
So I'd say for what is mainstream competition law in most fields, that's true. And you just have to learn it. And if, you know, either become self-taught or start attending lectures or just or workshops or what have you. But actually, I'd say not exclusively. So I just chaired a session that actually took a very interesting socio-legal approach. And if you and so this goes to some of the diversity. If that's what you feel comfortable doing, don't reinvent yourself. If you know if sociological framing is what you do, keep doing it. But just understand that you're doing a somewhat different project. You're trying to understand institutional relationships from a different framework, and that both creates opportunities in terms of the kinds of journals to publish. Sometimes it might be Law and Society or Law and Social Inquiry, not necessarily you know, one of the mainstream competition law journals, and that's fine. But just understand that the more you do something different, the more you have to think about who's your audience. But with that, I will say, Rupert, on one specific thing, if you are writing about technology and you are not married to a professor of engineering or computer science or data analytics, you must find another way to learn that field. And so you know, so in engineering, it's different. So computer science, you don't actually read journals. It's conference proceedings because things happen too quickly. But in other parts of engineering, there's still journals. And the application to business and competition settings, that's in marketing, that's in information systems. You want to understand, you know, blockchain and what it does with supply chain. You should be reading operation management. You know, frankly, you should be reading the finance journals as well. But you have to understand the underlying basis of technology and its implication for business. Otherwise, what you say on the legal side makes no sense to anyone who knows the field.
Thank you. Eva, do you want to put forward your question? Maybe Eva is just not with us at present. And this maybe gives me the opportunity to move a bit. Or Eva, sorry, I see you now.
Yeah. Sorry, no, I'm here. I was just out of the room, sorry. I was wondering whether you could further elaborate a bit on how to find out what style, topic, whatever suits for a specific journal. Because there are so many out there and it's quite difficult to find the right approach for one topic that you have in mind and you're interested in.
And this does not refer to, as you said in the chat, on the style and say citation styles or anything.
No, it really meant a substantial wise. So yeah, how to structure it, how to elaborate on the topic and so on.
Anything on that?
Very short suggestion here. Go to the journal, see what they have accepted in the last 2 or 3 years. You know, you don't have to read carefully everything, but just look at the style and look at what they're looking for, because that will give you, I think, a good example. And actually, you know, I have, when I started out, what I did is I took journal pieces that I liked. They did not necessarily relate to competition law, somewhere from corporate law and somewhere from other, you know, other fields, but they were really nicely written and really nicely done. And I put them on a file, you know, and I looked at them now and then. I said, I want my writing to be like them, because they were logical and they were, you know, organized and whatever. So you can refer, you know, back and forth in your mind and remind yourself how a good paper should look.
Thank you. We are already, unfortunately, nearing the end of this session, and I want to shift the focus for a second. Yukon asked in the chat, so how do I become a university professor, or what kinds of options do I have? I don't want to go into that question really, because this differs so enormously in all parts of the world, and we would probably not even cover the Netherlands if we started with that. But I want to ask the three of our professors one other question. Apart from excellent writing, what we have discussed so far mainly, what was we all know you don't just become a successful professor because you're just an excellent writer, or maybe yes. What do you consider yourself to be the most important piece in your, say, path or in your influences or so, apart from really writing good papers when you make your way into academia? Any thoughts on that? What was decisive for you in having this career and the success that you had?
You want to start? I can start if you want. I think it's passion.
Sorry?
Passion for what you do. I think that it's contagious. You know, if you really like I really love what I'm doing. If I don't, I change, you know. So I think that passion is contagious. And there are actually studies about that. So that's why I always say to my students, never waste your time. Always work only on things that really interest you.
Good point. Danny, what would you say?
I would agree. And so I'll only add one thing. You have already seen at whatever institution you're at that there are people who have passion and work really, really hard. And then you have people who maybe, shall we say, if it was a stove, they turned off the oven 20 years ago. And, you know, that's a wasted opportunity. And so it's not just about passion on that work, but it's a passion for, this is something long-term that you want, that you think you're going to have passion in. Because if you lack that passion, and sometimes people go through moments where they say, what's the next idea? And so I actually want to go through what happens when accidentally it's not an electric stove, but maybe it's a stove using wood, and all of a sudden the wood is burning down and you're left with just the coals. You know, how do you reignite the passion? And so sometimes it's work with other people who have passion because they bring passion to you, because as Michal said, it's contagious, number one. Number two, talk to other people, you know, talk to people in the field, say what's hot and try to figure it out, because they can't take the passion of practice and really come up with the big idea, but you can piece it together in new and creative ways. So that's about reigniting the passion. And the third thing is, there are some people who, when they think, is this really what I want to do? You're making a lifestyle choice. You're actually working just as hard as your law firm practitioner friends, but for a fraction of their salary. If that is not what you want to do, I would encourage you to, you know, either because A, you don't want to work hard, or B, you would like to have more money. Really, it's not just a waste for you to continue. Frankly, you're taking up a spot for somebody else who's desperate to get into this field.
Jojo.
Yeah, so as the Italian, I'll give a non-passion-based answer to this question, which is, I think I agree with what Michal and Danny have said. You know, passion and research is vital, but your question was saying, well, what else is there than research? And I think here it's important that you think about how the institution you're working in, or the institution would like to work in, values the non-research aspects of the work. So I worked in an institution, for instance, where citizenship was perceived to be important. That is to say, do some management job. Even when you're starting out, you can run mooting. I ran mooting for 10 years, which takes an incredible amount of time because you have to write moot problems and you know, assess students' work in a totally different way. But there will be other activities that you're asked to do, and you have to be very careful here that A, you play the game, that is to say you do them, because that's how your career will progress. They will look at your publications first, and if you don't make the cut with your publications, you don't get a promotion. But on the other hand, there are other things that you need to do, and you need to understand what those things are. Some places may put more emphasis on quality of teaching, and then you've got to invest a bit of time in that. Some places on funding, and you've got to invest a bit in securing funding. And so you need to balance out the various job requirements and have somebody explain to you how the jurisdiction you're working in values your time as a professional. So I think just on a more practical note, there are other things than research that you need to balance in. And
this somehow leads to the question of time management that Julia put up. Maybe Julia, you have, I give you 30 seconds to ask the questions, and I give the professors 30 seconds to answer, so that we fit everything in. We can practice time management here.
Okay, thank you so much. This session has been amazing, and I would like to thank you all for putting it up. It was really very helpful for me, and all the other faces that are not showing behind, I suppose. So my question is, for those who are professors and also practitioners, how do, just maybe only full-time dedicated academics, how do you deal with time management? Because as a lawyer and also someone who enjoys academia, but I don't intend to fully work on it all the time, I find myself struggling with time management. And that is, I suffer from the paranoia that Danny Sokol mentioned, that you keep just an eternal literature review and you never start writing, and it just keeps referring to articles and articles, and it's very time consuming. And I'm currently doing my PhD thesis, and I'm struggling with this. So yeah, my question is, how do you deal with time management? Do you have any tips on that? How do you balance deadlines and quality work? That's it. Thank you. Before
Daniel, I think you also do some practical work. Do you have any ideas on that?
Actually, the most time management I do is, so it turns out if you have a child, you learn time management skills. If you have more than one child, you really learn time management skills. So Julie, I don't know if you have a child, but if you don't have a child and you don't want one, get a dog, because it's the same kind of thing. You need to have structure in your life. And if you're not prone to structure, and I was not beforehand, you will learn it. And that's the best thing I could do. Just say, the more structure you have, the better for you.
So you know why to marry this IT guy now, because you have to learn time management when you have kids with him or her.
But just let me just interrupt. When you say structure, what do you mean? A routine, a helpful, whatever environment?
Everything. You know that your time is limited. So you say, between 10 a.m. and noon, I have time. This is going to be my quiet time. There are no interruptions. The house may be burning behind me. I am writing. I am going to get 500 words down in 2 hours. I don't care if it's just a copy and paste of footnotes. I will get it done. And if you do that on a regular basis, you will find that you actually have a lot more time for other things.
Right. And never, and always, you know, you should not strive for the perfect literature review. You should strive more for your own logical conclusions to be perfect, rather than, you know, reading everything anybody was ever written about. This is not a doctoral thesis. I mean, you might need it for a doctoral thesis. You don't need it afterwards. Nobody's going to give you extra points if you have 2 more pages of footnotes.
Aisha in the chat just reminds me of the initiative of We Are Competition, an initiative of students who do competition. I think this is also something, well, to be in touch with other people and younger people. And yeah, we hope that we provided this forum here. And it continues sort of in the online world with other formats and other initiatives. Magali and Orr established something after the competition or in isolation talks, etc. Before setting up this panel, I spoke with another professor who's a very, very known professor in the field. And he said, for my career, it was essential to take part in the Escola meetings. And I'm not making this up, because he came from a jurisdiction that was not centered in the middle of EU, and it was not US, and particularly for those who are probably not having the opportunity to present their work in the way that sort of people with better access to very good journals with native English skills, etc., have with many conferences going around. I think this is Escola provides some sort of forum, or at least I take that from the answer. And what I personally always like about Escola is that we get to hear the ideas of young people who have not yet well reached sort of the Olymp of antitrust law. I have to stop this session here, but this is maybe only the start of an ongoing process. You have seen other faces. You have seen 3 very, very good people who gave fantastic answers, if I may say that, and I would love to replay this all the time to learn myself. Thank you so much, Giorgio, Danny, Michal, for taking your time and giving advice. And when we see each other in person again, I guess that you are open, as all others are, to be approached in person. Let me just say that tomorrow at the end of the conference, we hand out the Best Junior Paper Award for a younger academic. So I invite you to tune in there. And also, of course, I want to guide your attention to the annex sessions that are starting tonight at 6 CEST, so Brussels time. There's a session chaired by Juan David Gutierrez, and tomorrow in the morning at 9 a.m. before the main track starts again, there is another session chaired by I forgot whom. Masako Wakui, I think, in the morning. So there's more going on in Escola tonight and tomorrow in the morning, and then we see each other again in the main panel. Thank you so much to the three, and good luck to all of you. We know it's a difficult path, but you'll make it. We're sure of that, particularly after this session. Thank you. Bye.